My wife smiled and said, "I have a date tonight. I hope you're not jealous." But my response wiped the smile right off her face. I'm going to tell you what happened that morning step by step, because now that I think about it, I realize all the signs were there. Carmen and I had been married for 3 years, and we had this routine where we would sit in our kitchen every morning and have coffee before I left for the mechanic shop. She would scroll through her phone while I read the local news on my tablet, and we'd talk about our plans for the day. That Tuesday started like any other in our home in Puebla. The autumn sun streamed through the kitchen window, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and there was the comfortable silence of a couple who had found their rhythm. Carmen was wearing that blue sweater I had given her for Christmas, her brown hair still messy from sleep, and she had an expression on her face I couldn't quite decipher. She was stirring her coffee with this little smile that seemed different somehow. Carmen had her quirks. She always stirred her coffee once, clockwise, and then left the spoon in the same spot on the counter. But that morning, she stirred it twice. I noticed because in 3 years of marriage, I had never seen her stir it twice. "Well," she said, still stirring, "I'm going out with someone tonight." The words came out as casually as if she were telling me she had a dentist appointment. I looked up from my tablet, sure I had misheard. "What? A date? Don't get jealous, Hector." She said it with this smug little smile, as if she were proud of herself for being so bold. My heart started to pound, but I kept my voice steady. "A date," I repeated. "Yes, with someone I've been talking to. It's nothing serious, just dinner and maybe a movie." She kept stirring that coffee, round and round, as if she were mixing the perfect storm. I sat there for a moment, watching her, and something clicked in my mind. All those nights she said she was working extra shifts at the bank, all those times she came home with a different perfume on her clothes, all those moments she guarded her phone like it contained state secrets. The pieces started to fit together with a clarity that almost hurt. "Well," I said, putting down my tablet and looking at her directly, "I hope your date thanks me for fixing those squeaky bed springs last weekend. It should make things much more comfortable." Carmen's spoon dropped into her cup with a loud clink. The smug smile vanished from her face, replaced by something that looked like shock mixed with panic. Her cheeks flushed, and for the first time in months, she seemed genuinely speechless. "What is that supposed to mean?" she managed to whisper. I stood up, took my coffee cup, and walked to the sink to rinse it out. "It means exactly what it means, Carmen. Enjoy your date." I gave her a calm smile, the kind you'd give a stranger at the supermarket, and headed upstairs to our bedroom. She followed me, her voice rising. "Hector, what are you talking about? It's just a casual dinner." But I was already closing the bedroom door behind me. I turned the lock, something I had never done in our entire marriage, and sat on the edge of the bed. I could hear her on the other side, knocking softly at first, then more insistently. "Hector, please, let's talk about this." But I just sat there, staring at the wall, processing what had just happened. My wife of 3 years had just announced she was going on a date. She told me not to be jealous and expected me to, what? Wish her luck. Pack her a sandwich for the road. The audacity of it all was almost impressive. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through our text messages from the last few weeks. All those times she said she was working late, all those weekends she suddenly had to help her sister move or attend a work conference. I had been so focused on building our life together, working extra hours at the shop to save for a down payment on a house, that I had missed the obvious signs. Or maybe I had chosen to ignore them. Either way, I wasn't going to ignore them anymore. The knocking on the door had stopped. I could hear Carmen's footsteps retreating down the hall, and then the sound of the front door closing. She had left for work, or wherever she was really going. I sat there for another hour, not moving, just thinking. Then I got up, got dressed, and headed to Lopez Auto Repair as if it were any other day. Because in a way, it was. It was just the first day of the rest of my life without Carmen. The next few days were like living in some twisted alternate reality, where everything looked normal on the surface but felt completely wrong underneath. Carmen acted as if nothing had happened, chatting about her day at the bank, asking about my work at the shop, even suggesting we watch a movie together on Friday night. But I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before, the way she angled her phone away from me when she texted, how she had suddenly started taking longer showers, and the fact that she'd bought new lingerie I'd never seen her wear around the house. I started paying closer attention to her belongings, and that's when I found it. Carmen kept a small planner in her purse, one of those leather-bound things where she wrote down appointments and reminders. She had left it on the kitchen counter on Thursday morning while getting ready for work. I flipped through it, not really expecting to find anything conclusive, but there it was, tucked between the pages for last week, a napkin from Romano's, the fancy Italian place downtown we'd never been to because it was way out of our budget. But it wasn't just any napkin. Someone had scrawled, "Same place, same time," in red ink, and there was a lipstick print pressed into the corner like a kiss. My hand started to shake as I held it up to the light. The handwriting wasn't Carmen's, it was too bold, too masculine. I took a picture of it with my phone, then placed it back exactly where I'd found it. The rest of the day at the shop, I couldn't concentrate on anything. Javier kept asking me if I was okay, but I just told him I was tired. That night, Carmen announced she was going out with some friends from work. "Just a girls' night," she said, putting on that black dress she'd worn to our anniversary dinner last year. "Don't wait up for me." I watched her apply her makeup with extra care, dabbing on more perfume than usual, and I knew. I waited 20 minutes after she left. Then I got in my truck and drove to the Marriott Hotel downtown. I had a hunch, and sure enough, there was Carmen's car in the parking lot. I parked a few rows away and walked into the lobby, trying to look casual. The hotel bar was dimly lit, and I saw them immediately. Carmen was sitting at a corner table with a guy I'd never seen before. He was tall, muscular, with the kind of confident smile that probably worked on a lot of women. This had to be Raul, the personal trainer she had mentioned in passing a few months ago. I watched them for about 15 minutes, noticing how she laughed at everything he said, how she kept touching his arm, how she looked at him the way she used to look at me. They finished their drinks and headed for the elevator together. I felt a tightness in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I followed them, keeping far enough back to avoid being seen, and watched the elevator stop on the 7th floor. I waited a few minutes, then took the next elevator up. The hallway was empty, and I could hear voices coming from room 712. I stood there for a moment, listening to my wife's laughter mingling with his deeper voice, and then I made my decision. I went back down to the lobby's business center and printed two things, the photo I had taken of the napkin and a screenshot of Carmen's work calendar, showing she had blocked off this exact time with the note, "Personal appointment." I put both papers in an envelope from the front desk and wrote, "For your consideration," on the outside. Then I went back upstairs and slipped the envelope under the door of room 712. The voices inside stopped abruptly, and I could hear movement, probably someone walking toward the door. I was already halfway down the hall by then, taking the stairs instead of the elevator. I drove home and sat in my living room, waiting. Carmen got home around midnight, trying to be quiet as she slipped through the front door. "How was girls' night?" I asked from the couch, startling her. "Oh, it was fun," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We went to that new place on Water Street." But I could smell it on her, a different perfume, something heavier and more expensive than what she had been wearing when she left. And there, just barely visible on the side of her neck, was a small smear of red lipstick that perfectly matched the print on that napkin. "That's nice," I said, turning back to the TV. "I'm glad you had fun." Friday morning began with Carmen's phone buzzing non-stop. She had left it on the kitchen counter while she showered, and I could see message after message lighting up the screen. Most were from a contact labeled RT. Raul, I assumed. The messages were coming in so fast I couldn't read them all, but I caught bits of words like, "about the evidence," and, "what do we do now?" When Carmen came downstairs, her hair still damp from the shower, she snatched her phone with trembling hands and started scrolling through the messages. Her face went pale as she read, and I watched as her fingers flew across the screen as she typed furiously in reply. "Everything okay?" I asked, buttering my toast as if nothing was wrong. "Yeah, just work stuff," she said, not looking up from her phone. But her voice was tight, strained in a way I'd never heard before. The phone rang, and she glanced at the ID before quickly declining it. It rang again. She immediately declined it again. By the third call, her hands were visibly shaking. "You should probably answer that," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "Sounds important." She shot me a look that was part panic, part suspicion, but she answered the phone this time. "Hello." Her voice was barely a whisper. I could hear a man's voice on the other end, speaking fast and urgent, though I couldn't make out the words. Carmen kept saying, "I don't know," and, "Calm down, we'll figure it out." She finally hung up and turned to me with this forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hector, we need to talk." "Sure," I said, finishing my toast. "What's on your mind?" "It's about the other night. I know you might have gotten the wrong impression, but Raúl is just a friend from the gym. We were just catching up over dinner." I nodded thoughtfully. "Raúl, the personal trainer." "Yes, exactly. He's been helping me with a workout routine." "At the Marriott Hotel?" The question hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. Carmen's face went through several expressions: surprise, fear, then something that looked like calculation. "How did you know?" she started, then stopped. "I mean, yes, we had dinner at the hotel restaurant. It was nothing inappropriate, Hector. I don't know why you're being so paranoid." "Paranoid," I repeated, setting down my coffee cup. "That's an interesting choice of words. Tell me, Carmen, what room number was the restaurant in?" "What?" "The hotel restaurant. What room number?" She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "I don't understand what you're asking me." "I'm asking because I'm curious about this restaurant that apparently exists on the 7th floor of the Marriott, specifically in room 712. The color drained from her face completely. She sank heavily into the chair across from me, her phone clattering onto the table. "Hector, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. But before you do, I have a question about your planner." I pulled out my phone and showed her the picture I had taken of the napkin. "Can you explain what 'same place, same time' means? And whose lipstick is that?" Carmen looked at the photo, then at me, then back at the photo. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, harder, more defensive. "You went through my personal things. You followed me. I suggested she stay with you while we sort some things out." "Things?" Her voice rose. "She told me you've been accusing her of having an affair. She says you've been following her, going through her things. This doesn't sound like the Hector I know." "You're right," I said, pulling out my phone. "It's not the Hector you know. But sometimes people change when they have to." I showed her the picture of the napkin and the evidence from the hotel. Pilar took the phone, squinting at the screen. Her expression changed from defensive to confused to something that looked like dawning comprehension. "Hector, I don't know what to say. Carmen told me you were being paranoid, that you were imagining things. I know this is hard to hear, Pilar. I love Carmen, but I can't pretend this isn't happening anymore." She handed me back my phone and stood there in silence for a moment. Finally, she spoke, her voice much quieter than before. "She has been different lately, more secretive. I thought it was just stress from work, but..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "I need to have a talk with my daughter." 2 weeks passed in a kind of strange peace. Carmen had been staying at her mother's, and according to Pilar, things were not going well. Apparently, Raúl had ended whatever they had the moment he realized there was evidence of their affair. "It's getting too complicated," he told her, Pilar had said when she stopped by the shop again. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I felt a pang of something, not exactly satisfaction, but maybe validation. Carmen had thrown away 3 years of marriage for a guy who bolted the second things got difficult. I had been using those 2 weeks to think, to really process what I wanted from my life. I had started seeing Dr. Ramirez, a marriage counselor, not because I wanted to save my marriage, but because I needed to understand how I had gotten to this point. During our sessions, it became clear that Carmen had been manipulating situations for months, making me feel like I was the problem every time I questioned her behavior. Gaslighting, Dr. Ramirez called it. She was rewriting reality to make you doubt your own perceptions. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Carmen decided to come home. I was at the shop working on a transmission rebuild when Javier came over with a worried expression. "Hector, your wife has been calling the shop phone. Says she can't reach you on your cell and needs to talk to you urgently." I had changed my number the week before, something I probably should have mentioned to Carmen, but I hadn't gotten around to it. "What did you tell her?" "That you were busy with a customer and would call her back, but she sounded pretty upset." I nodded and went back to work. About an hour later, my new cell phone rang. It was Pilar. "Hector, Carmen went to your house. She's not taking it well." "Taking what well?" "The locks. You changed the locks." I had, indeed, changed the locks. I had also left a note taped to the front door that simply said, "This number is no longer in service. Please contact through my lawyer if necessary." It wasn't cruel, just clear. "She's heading to the shop," Pilar continued. "She's pretty worked up. I thought you should know." I thanked Pilar and hung up. About 20 minutes later, Carmen stormed through the garage doors like a hurricane. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes were red from crying, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Hector," she yelled, marching over to where I was working. "We need to talk. Now." I looked up from the transmission I was rebuilding. "Hello, Carmen. How are you?" "How am I? How am I?" Her voice was rising, and I could see Javier and the other guys trying to look busy while obviously listening in. "You changed the locks on our house. You changed your phone number. You left me a note like I'm some kind of stranger." "You're not a stranger," I said calmly, wiping my hands on a rag. "But you're not my wife anymore, either." "What is that supposed to mean?" "Hector, I know I made mistakes, but we can work this out. Raúl was nothing, he was just a distraction. I realize now that what we have is real, that it's worth fighting for." I looked at her for a long moment, at this woman I had loved for 3 years, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no nostalgia. Just a kind of empty clarity. "Carmen, do you know what I've learned about myself these past 2 weeks?" "What?" "I've learned that I'm no longer available for games. I'm not available for someone who thinks marriage is something you can take a break from when you get bored." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. I had stopped wearing it the day she left. I placed it on the workbench between us with a soft, metallic click. "I'm not available for someone who thinks don't get jealous is an appropriate way to announce a date with another man." Carmen stared at the ring, then at me, then back at the ring. "Hector, please. I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you. I know you love me, Carmen. But love isn't enough anymore. Respect is. Trust is. And those are things you can't just decide to give back after you've taken them away." She stood there for a moment, looking lost and small in a way I'd never seen before. Then she picked up the ring and held it out to me. "I don't want this to be over." "It was over the morning you told me about your date," I said gently. "I've just finally accepted it. That was 6 months ago." Carmen tried calling from Pilar's house a few more times, tried to reach me through mutual friends, even showed up at the shop one more time. But I had learned something valuable from Dr. Ramirez. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Silence has a way of speaking louder than any argument. These days, I'm dating Sophia, who runs the coffee shop 2 blocks from the garage. She's honest about her day, doesn't guard her phone like it contains state secrets, and when she says she's going somewhere, she actually goes there. We're taking things slow, we talk about everything, and she makes me laugh in ways I had forgotten were possible. Sophia knows about Carmen, about the divorce, about everything, and she's never once made me feel like I was asking for too much when I asked for basic honesty and respect. Sometimes I see Carmen's car drive past the shop, slowing down as if she's thinking about stopping, but she never does. Pilar told me Carmen moved to Tlaxcala, got a job at a different bank, and is trying to figure things out. I hope she does figure them out, I really do. But I also hope she figures them out far away from me. Because I've built something good here, something solid, something based on the revolutionary idea that marriage should be a partnership, not a performance. And I'm no longer available for anything less than that.